Hi, my name is Emma, and in today's lesson, we are going to be looking at the IELTS. So the IELTS is a test that a lot of ESL students have to take when they want to go to a Canadian university, an Australian university, an English university. So when they want to study overseas, or oftentimes when they want to immigrate to one of these countries. Okay? So we're looking specifically at the speaking part of the IELTS, part 2. So the IELTS speaking task is split up into 3 sections. We are going to be looking at section 2 in this video. Okay, so let me first explain what happens in section 2, and then we are going to look at some tips on what you should do if you want to do well on this section, and things you shouldn't do. Okay? So let's get started. So in the part 2 of the speaking component of the IELTS, you will be speaking for about 2 minutes. Okay, so this part lasts for about 3 minutes. So you have 3 minutes. The first minute, you will be handed a question card. Okay, so here is an example of a question card. So it will tell you oftentimes to describe something, describe a museum that you have visited. It will tell you what you need to say. You should say where it is, why you went there, what you particularly remember. This is just an example. Okay, so it can be on different topics, but you will get a card that looks something like this. Okay, so you have 1 minute to look at the question and to make notes and to think, okay, what am I going to say? So that takes 1 minute. And then after that, the examiner will tell you, okay, you can begin. You must talk for 1 to 2 minutes. So a lot of students actually consider this the hardest part of the speaking component because it's not a dialogue, okay? The examiner isn't asking you questions and you're giving responses and you're going back and forth. In this part of the IELTS, you just talk, and you talk for 1 to 2 minutes. So a lot of students find this difficult because talking for 2 minutes, even for some native speakers, is a little difficult. Okay, so that's what's going to happen in this part. Okay, so what are some of the topics you might be asked about in this part of the IELTS? Well, topics often covered include, you might be asked about a precious item. So you might have to describe a precious item that you own. You might have to say something about where you bought it from, or how did you get it? What does it look like? Why is it so precious? You might be asked about a special day, a sporting event that you went to, or a concert, a special trip or journey or vacation, people who have influenced you. For example, they might ask you to describe your favorite teacher. What was she like? Why was she so great? You might be asked about a book, music, television program, a movie you saw, or even items of clothing. Okay. So sometimes you're asked about historical buildings. You might be asked about a neighborhood in your city. The key thing that you probably will be asked is this question is often about description. Not always, but usually you have to describe something. And then they usually have 3 questions. They can be who, what, when, where, why. Okay? So these are the types of questions that they ask. All right, so now let's look at some things you can do in order to do well on this part of the IELTS. Okay, so what are some of the do's for the IELTS, for the speaking part? Okay, number 1, very, very important, take notes. You're given 1 minute where you get to look at the question and you're given a pencil and you can take notes. Do it. Take notes. A lot of ESL students, they think, I don't really want to take notes. It's a waste of time. I know what I'm going to say in my head. What happens is while they're speaking, they forget certain key points and they go off topic. They don't stay organized. So your notes are very important because they keep you on topic and they keep you organized, which is one thing you're marked on. Okay? Another thing that is very important, actually, write keywords. So when you're making your notes, don't bother writing sentences of what you're going to say. You only have 1 minute. Just write keywords, important words that will help you to remember what you want to say. Okay? It's very important to cover every point that is on the card. Okay, so in our previous example, it said describe a museum that you have visited, and it said where was the museum. I think it said what do you remember most about the museum, and why were you at the museum. So if you get these 3 questions, make sure you answer each question, okay? And what's a good way to know you've answered each question? As you talk, point. So for example, this is point to point as you talk. Put your finger on the point you're talking about. So if this says, why did you go to the museum? Point at this while you talk about that point, and then move your finger to the next point as you talk about it. This will help you to remember what you've said and to keep you on track. Okay? Another very important thing to do is these often ask you about your own experiences. Describe your favorite teacher, for example. Okay? So it's good if you can remember one of your teachers or whatever the question asks. It's good if you use your own experience, but maybe you've never been to a concert. Maybe you've never been to a sporting event, and that's what the question asks. If this is the case, lie. Okay? Make it up. If your friend told you a story once about when they went to a concert, steal your friend's story. Okay? It's okay to lie and to steal other people's stories on the IELTS. The main thing is that you practice, or not practice, that you speak English. So whether you tell your own story about a museum you visited, or if you've never visited a museum, pretend you went to the Louvre in France. Talk about how you saw the Mona Lisa and how it was a beautiful painting. You can make stuff up, it's okay. Okay, the next point of do's is expand your answers, okay? So if it says, where was the museum located? Instead of just saying for that point, the museum is in Toronto. Okay, that's too short. Expand on this point. The museum is located in the downtown core of Toronto. It's close to the university, some very important restaurants, and the CN Tower. Okay, not true, but just you can expand your answer. Make it long, give examples. Okay, another thing that is a good idea, because these questions are often about describing, it's good to use your senses. Meaning, when you have to describe something, imagine it in your mind, and if you run out of things to say, think about your senses. What did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it sound like? For some of these, maybe you didn't taste them, like a building, but you get the idea. You can use your senses to help you imagine the area better, or the object or the person. Okay, the next point, organize your speech. This is a must. Okay, so some students, when they do this part of the IELTS, they talk and they talk and they talk, but there's no organization. So what you need to do is it's very good to have an introduction, it's very good to have a body, and it's good to have a conclusion. It's almost like you're doing an essay, but you're saying it. You want to introduce the topic, then you want to address all the points, the 3 points, and then you want some sort of conclusion. You can say, so this is why this was a very memorable experience. To sum up, my trip to Holland was a fantastic experience I'll never forget. Okay, so you want a conclusion as well. Okay, like I said earlier, it's good to imagine in your head the object, person, or place. This is a very good thing to do. It will help you to be less nervous as well. Okay. Use introductory phrases. So when you introduce your topic, first thing you should say, I want to talk about blank. I'd like to talk about blank. I'm going to talk about blank. You can use any of these, but it's good. This can be your introduction. I'm going to talk about my trip to Spain. I'm going to talk about my teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I'm going to talk about the most precious object in my life, which is my pocket watch. Okay, so you can say whatever you'd like, but use an introductory phrase. This is a very important point. Use transitions. So what do I mean by that? Well, transitions help to organize what you're going to say. First of all, secondly, thirdly, finally. These are all examples of transitions. And if you're, in this case, you may be talking about what happened somewhere. You might be describing an event. First, we went to the soccer stadium. Then we watched the game. After that, we went for ice cream. So you can use these types of transitions. First, then, next, after that, finally. These will help you in your cohesion marks. So in your fluency and cohesion mark. Finally, very important, speak loudly. Okay? You don't want to mumble. You don't want to be shy. You want to be confident. So be confident, make eye contact when you talk, speak loudly. These are all important tips. Another thing, practice. Okay? Practice talking for 2 minutes. You might have to build up to this. For some people, talking for long periods of time is very difficult. So maybe speaking English for 1 minute is really difficult for you. Start with 30 seconds. Then move that to 1 minute, then 1.5 minutes, then 2 minutes. But you must practice speaking for 2 minutes. One thing that a lot of people do is they think, oh, okay, I need to speak for 1 to 2 minutes in this part of the IELTS. That's true, but the closer you get to 2 minutes, the better. So if you're at 1 minute, that's a little bit of a short answer. Ideally, you want to be able to talk for 2 minutes. Okay? And also, don't rush with what you're going to say. Speak nice and at a good rate. So not too fast, not too slow. Okay. One other thing I wanted to say about do. It's not on this list, but oftentimes you will be using the past tense. Okay? So for this part of the IELTS, the past tense is very important. Get used to talking about past experiences using the past tense. Okay, so now let's look at don'ts. Okay, so now I have a list of things you should not do. Okay, so these are the don'ts. So don't do this. Okay, the first one, a lot of ESL students want to do this. They want to memorize answers in advance. So they look up a whole bunch of different questions, and then they write down what they're going to say, and they spend so much time memorizing for each question. This is not a good idea because, first of all, it's easy to tell when you've memorized something. It doesn't sound natural. You're going to lose marks if it sounds like you've memorized something. And there are just too many different questions they can ask. So don't memorize answers. That's not a good way to prepare. Instead, focus on expanding your vocabulary. Okay? Practice talking about museums. What words do you need to know where you can talk about museums? Same with objects, teachers. How can you describe someone? So try to come up with descriptive words. Expand your vocabulary. That would be a better way to prepare for this. Okay, don't write too much. I told you for the first part of this section, you get to write for 1 minute. Don't write full sentences. It's good to write about 1 to 2 words per point. So there's about 3 points. 1 to 2 words is good. Don't panic. Okay? A lot of students, as soon as they get to this part of the exam, they get really nervous and they panic. and their English just goes down. So don't panic. Use stress management techniques. Breathe. That's a good thing to do when you're nervous, okay? Imagine you're in a nice green forest or on a nice beach. You can do these things. It will help you not to panic. It's also good before the IELTS, I find, before the speaking part, if you can go on a walk. Walking actually calms your heart. It calms you down. It's a good thing to do. Don't focus too much on one point. So there are 3 things you have to address at least. Don't spend your whole time talking about the first thing. So for example, if you have to describe your favorite teacher, and the first question is, when did you have her as a teacher? Don't spend your whole time covering this point. Okay, make sure you cover each point they ask you to. Don't use boring words. Okay, remember, you're getting marked on vocabulary. You want to use interesting vocabulary. So for example, good, that's a boring word. Bad, again, a boring word. Use something interesting. Like, my favorite teacher was really exciting. She was very enthusiastic. That's so much better than just saying, my favorite teacher was good. Okay, or the museum I went to was bad. No, use something better. Don't give short answers, meaning you have to talk for at least a minute. Make sure you do this. It's better to even talk for close to 2 minutes. Make sure your answers aren't too short. So for example, I once went to the ROM. It was a good experience. The end. Too short. You need to expand your answer. Don't go off topic. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you have to describe the most precious item you have, don't start talking about education or technology. Unless it's relevant to what you're talking about, don't go off topic. Just talk about what they want you to talk about. Okay? This is actually a very important point. A lot of students tell me they really worry about their accents. They think, oh, I can't pronounce things very well. I might mispronounce a word. I have problems pronouncing R, for example, or certain letters, CH. It's okay if your pronunciation is not perfect. The main thing, and if you have an accent, it's okay if you have an accent. Most people have accents, so you don't have to worry about your accent. It's also, well, actually, everybody has an accent. I have a Canadian accent, for example. Now, does my Canadian accent mean my American friends cannot understand me? No. So it's okay if you have an accent. The main thing is that people understand what you're saying. So don't worry about your accent. Worry more about enunciating things, about saying things clearly. That's what you want to do. And again, grammar is one thing you're marked on. Your grammar does not have to be perfect. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. Move on. Okay? You can make mistakes. It's okay if you make mistakes. Okay. So I'd like to recommend a website where you can get more tips on part 2 of the IELTS and also practice questions. Again, very important to practice. Practice with a timer. Make sure you're speaking for 2 minutes. Go to www.goodluckielts.com. Okay, so www.goodluckielts.com. Here you will find more tips. And also come visit us at our website, www.engvid.com, where you can do a practice test on what you've just learned. So until next time, take care.